Amanda Mundell. This has indeed been around. It was a decade ago. I competed for UCLA in undergrad. I graduated from law school a few years ago, and I'm now an attorney with the Department of Justice, but still involved in mock trial. I coach for UCLA Law School and for American University undergrad.
10 years. I've never felt older in my life. I'm Brandon Hughes. Was also on the UCLA team, competed there for pretty much my entire time there, competed in law school at Berkeley Law. I coach now. I coached a little bit with UCLA after I graduated before law school, but now I work with UC Berkeley undergrads and sometimes the law school teams. I'm a litigator at a big firm doing commercial litigation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Iain Lampert. I never went to law school. I did UCLA undergraduate mock trial. Now I work as a regional manager for a tutoring company that specializes in public speaking, mock trial model United Nations called Modern Brain. I'm trying with limited success to grow a beard. This is a couple months. I don't know if we're ever going to get there.
It's a pretty good beard. Better than I can grow, at least. So Amanda started to talk about it a minute ago, but we're about to watch what I would say is one of the few most iconic rounds of mock trial at any level, the 2011 AMTA National Championship between NYU and your UCLA team. I remember the night before my first college mock trial round. It was the Penn State Invitational in 2011. And the president at the time, who was still a friend of mine, invited me to his house to show me what a college mock trial round looked like, and showed me the DVD of this round. And I watched the whole thing, and I thought, I will never be that good. This is incredible. And so many people, I mean, you guys have inspired, I'd say, I mean, that sounds kind of crazy to say, but you've inspired, I think, a generation of competitors with this round. And so many people that I talked to when I started this series, when I asked them what I should watch, this was the first thing they said, this round. How does it make you guys feel that 10 years later, people are still watching this round? They still talk about it. All the amazing things that you guys did in this round. And when you won the national championship as a B team, which we'll talk about in a second. How does it make you feel years later?
I mean, I think Brandon put it best, a little old in light of the fact that this is a decade ago, but that's very touching. It was a very special year for us. I think many of us were new to that caliber of competition. Many of us were new to the activity, and just to see how elite that round turned out to be. And, you know, we've stayed in contact over the years since to see that other students continue to look to that round as a touchstone for mock trial. It's very inspiring and very touching.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling. You know, this round is very, very special to me. You know, being a lawyer was always something that was kind of in the back of my mind growing up, as something that might be interesting to do, but, you know, just kind of fortuitously, I guess, I just ran into someone at UCLA who handed me a flyer, and I joined the team. And, you know, being in that program, being on this team is what made me believe that I could be a lawyer. And even in the years directly after, where people would come up and say, hey, we watched this round, we train our new students on this round. It's an amazing thing. And I think the floor in terms of talent has risen so much in recent years. Now that I'm like coaching undergrads, you know, I see it every year, and I think that's amazing. Just the thought that this round may have had even something to do with that, it's phenomenal.
I echo what Amanda and Brandon said. I think a couple of things. I'm happy that this round is a useful educational tool, but it makes me feel sad that there aren't more rounds from earlier than 2011 that were well preserved. Certainly there are some, but I'd like to see some early 2000s mock trial at high quality. I'm sad that we're not able to chart it the full way through. But on the flip side, it makes me happy that now there's so much high quality footage of great rounds that are distributed all of the time, some of which have been commentated on earlier with this channel. I think second, I'm happy that I stayed in touch with the people involved with UCLA mock trial. Tim Hoyanga, who's not in this round, but was on the team at the time, was my best man and also officiated my wedding. And last, it reminds me of luck, because I just looked at the tab summary for this round. We went 6-2 with a CS of 17.5. Georgia was 6-2 with a CS of 17. Tufts was 6-2 as well. So easily, flip of a coin, it could have been NYU versus Georgia versus Tufts. And then everything that spiraled after this round and the impact that it's had on our lives could have been totally different. So thinking about this just really makes me think of the luck involved in this activity and the butterfly effect that can ensue.
Especially back in those days, because 8 ballots.
Yeah.
They do more now, right?
Yes. Yeah, some people watching this are like 6-2. What is he talking about? Yeah, so NCT, I think through 2013, did 8 ballots. I think 14 or 15 was the first year for 3 ballots per round. And now that's just the norm.
2013, they had 3, 2014 as well. Then in 15, I think it was 3 as well. But then 16, the Daniel Stern, Yale, Rezu, everyone, Allison Durkin year, they really ratcheted it up. It was like 5 ballots that year.
Wow.
I think that was that in DC?
I think Furman hosted. DC was 2013.
Right. So I think you guys kind of sold yourselves just a little bit short when you introduced yourselves a minute ago. So I will do the honors of giving you your real introductions. Amanda, you are an AMTA national champion. You are a law school national champion. You've coached several law school teams to national championships. Recently, a couple of weeks ago at Loyola Los Angeles's tournament, the National Civil Trial Competition. Brandon, you were a national champion in undergrad. You were a very credentialed competitor at the law school level. You were, I think, your teams were Final Four twice at Thailand Nationals in law school. Am I getting that right?
That might be right. Maybe 1 top 4, 1 top 8. I don't know if it's top 4 twice.
You were in the playoffs at least 2 of those 3 years, which is an incredible feat in and of itself. And like you said at the beginning, you're coaching some pretty successful teams. Iain, you're a 2-time AMTA national champion, and you've coached some pretty successful high school speech and debate teams. And I think what people don't realize, even the really crazy mock trial people who think they know everything about mock trial in this round in particular, probably don't realize that this was a B team. This was not UCLA A that won the national championship in 2011, which I think we alluded to earlier. Kind of give us the backstory of how that all came to be. How did you guys end up at nationals? What was the story behind a B team making this crazy run?
Well, it involves some personalities and some drama. We had a pretty experienced, very elite A team that I think ran into some bad luck at Orcs, some bad judging, but also made some mistakes, ran into some tough teams. And they ended up not making it out, but we did. And this was at a time, and I don't know if this is still true for UCLA, but it was sort of at a time when the teams kind of, whatever team earned the bid would take it, unless it was like a C team or a D team, in which case often the bid would go to the A team. And there was an opportunity to restack or reshuffle. And at kind of our own insistence and partly backed up by some of the coaches who had helped us, everybody said, this team has kind of been through the ringer, and we just have a special magic and a special cohesion. So we're not going to do a massive reshuffle or restack. We're just going to see what happens. And I think that's maybe the long and short of it. But Brandon and Iain probably have additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe to say it was definitely at our own insistence. I mean, I remember it's definitely at my insistence. But I was so new to like mock trial that like I as a coach now, I would probably look at it differently, just depending on the circumstances. As a coach now, I would probably say there's no real categorical rule. But at the time, I was just new to it, and it just didn't register for me. I was like, we won the thing. Why can't we go? And so I didn't really understand what the debate was really about. Of course, I do get it now, but I was having so much fun with this team, and I do think that there was a special chemistry that this team had at that time, and I was just having a great time, and I just wanted wanted to keep it going. And, we had some coach support and we got to go.
Was there a lot of pressure from whether it be the coaches in your program or your alums who are helping out or the A team themselves to give the bid to the A team?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was at least some, I know that there were a lot of hard feelings from other competitors in the program. And I'm sure that that dissipated over time, in particular, once, they saw how nationals turned out. But many of them, this was their last year in mock trial. Many of them had stayed on to compete, even though they'd graduated in the fall, and were like trying to do grad school or applying to law school. And so, tensions were pretty high. And I think they felt like they just had gotten a raw deal at Orcs. But I don't think there was too much coach pushback on us going.
Yeah, I that's my recollection of it too. And what I will say is that once the decision was made, I do feel like the program really kind of coalesced around us, tried to polish some of the more raw competitors up a little bit, and that was a cool thing to see as well, including some of the competitors on the A team. I specifically recall helping me prepare, and I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I was fully expecting to be replaced. Up until that point, I'd competed in only a couple rounds. I was there as a backup witness in case another witness was stolen, and mostly I carried around boxes. And so I was fully expecting that our great character witnesses on the A team would replace me. And I was like, yeah, it was fun while it lasted. It was happy to be here for the ride. But I will say that everyone on the A team, the coaches for the A team, everyone completely coalesced. And I remember that it was like, everybody is here to help us to make sure that as a program we win. Once you reach a certain threshold, I want to say a couple weeks out before that championship, I remember just about everybody being willing to step up, to help do crosses, to comment on small things, to workshop jokes. It was a big program coming together in a really cool way that I loved as a freshman.
So Amanda, you were the only of the three of you were a sophomore at that time?
That would have been junior year for me.
So you were a junior, so you were probably more cognizant of kind of what was going on in terms of A versus B than Iain and Brandon were at the time. You guys were, at least as far as I know, the only B team to ever win NCT in all the years that we've been doing this. Given that you were a junior and you were probably more conscious of what was kind of happening, did you feel any kind of pressure as, we are the B squad? And the UCLA, at least as far as I'm told, was one of the favorites going into Orcs that year to win the national championship. Did you guys feel like you had something to prove, given that you were the B squad and there was all this contention around who was going to get the bid? How did that kind of feel within the program?
Well, I remember feeling a bit torn. So a lot of the members of our A team I had competed with as a freshman. I was just a witness my freshman year. I shouldn't say just a witness. Witnesses are very important, but I mean, relative to like the stuff I was doing later, I was a witness my freshman year on the A team. And so some of those competitors were still around in the program my third year. I had been on the C team my second year and then took a break from mock trial and came back halfway through my junior year and made it onto the B team. But I remember thinking, everybody thought that those friends of mine on the A team were going to be all Americans. They were going to win the national championship or at least make a run for it. And here we are, kind of this team of slightly inexperienced, a little misfit, like just sort of trying random stuff in rounds. I really didn't know what was going to happen at nationals. And, I felt really good about our preparation, but I remember feeling like, man, it would be really awkward if we came home and didn't, perform at the level that, everybody had helped prepare us to get to. But, things just kept working out at the tournament.
The case this year, and this was before AMTA did a new case for nationals. This is 2011. So the case for the entire year was Davis v. Happy Land Toy Company. What was the case about?
It was about a product called the Princess Beads, which is still Iain's description, which for some reason I almost remember verbatim. I guess it's a make it your own jewelry set. So there were a bunch of beads, and the gimmick to the beads was, instead of using string to put them together, you would spray them with water and they would stick together and they would be wearable. The chemical that they used to make it such that water would cause the beads to stick together was 1,4-butanediol. And that chemical, when ingested, turns into GHB in the system. So you have this proud dad of a 2-year-old boy. He buys his older child, like a 10-year-old, the princess beads as a gift. The kid loves the beads, can't stay away from them. And one day he swallows a bunch of them. The chemical turns to GHB, the child dies, the parent sues, and we were the evil defense attorneys that took on Happy Land as our client.
To add to that, I think this foreshadowed some of the changes that would later come with the new case for AMTA Nationals, because prior to Nationals, the plaintiff could choose one of two charges. They could go with strict liability or negligence per se. And they shifted that for Nationals in favor of a straight negligence charge that I think is far closer in terms of how the rounds played out to what we saw in 2013 with the Allen versus Neptune Underwater Expeditions case. But it's interesting because, as far as I know, this is the first ever AMTA case that allowed the plaintiff team to choose between two charges that would really shape the trial in that captain's meeting. At the time, I had no idea what was going on. After reviewing the case years later, now I realize how novel that was.
So the first thing that we're going to watch is Brandon, your cross-examination of the father of the little boy who died from the princess beads, or maybe he didn't die from the princess beads. I guess we'll find out.
And this guy, Corellis Bryant, I gotta say, if you've never heard of this guy, I think you could probably see him in the AMTA DVD from the year before, because they were the defending national champions, and he was an attorney in that round. Just one of the most dynamic competitors I've ever seen. Even as an attorney, as a witness, multi-talented. I wasn't so deep into AMTA and the message boards and all that stuff that I knew who everyone was, but I knew who Corellis was. So I was very nervous about this cross.
I want to ask you more about him in a second, but let's watch the first minute or so.
Further questions?
Cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, the defense would move to admit as Defense Exhibit A this record of outpatient visit. It's essentially the discharge papers from an emergency room visit for Joey Davis on October 5th of 2008, where he was treated for breathing problems that he was exhibiting.
That's Exhibit A?
Defense Exhibit A, Your Honor.
Very well. Exhibit A is admitted.
Your Honor, I just asked that I see the exhibit before it's admitted into evidence.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, counsel. You said what?
Sorry, Your Honor, I just asked if I could see the exhibit before it was entered into evidence.
Very well. It's already admitted, though, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
It's already admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, you have to object right away when he offers.
When I was watching this back, I was like, a very reasonable request that he was like unnecessarily mean about. Like, she just wanted to see the exhibit. didn't really get why he gave her a hard time there, but
I wasn't gonna question him.
Yeah, I'm not a real judge, so I don't know. What do I know?
I really like, Brandon, how you explain what's in the exhibit. One of the problems that I see in some online AMTA now is they rely on the brief screen share of the exhibit to explain itself, which means that people are reading the exhibit and not paying attention to what's being said, or vice versa. And I like that, given that we're not publishing it in this huge way that everyone can see it, you just let the jury know what's going on there. I think that's useful as a tactic.
Yeah, and plain language, that's what I always coach as well. I always tell my students about this old movie, Philadelphia. Denzel Washington plays the lawyer, and his kind of catchphrase is, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, and that's a big problem that I see with AMTA mock trial too. It's either there's this expectation that these judges who come in, on a weekend, half the time barely want to be there, that they're going to know every single bit of that case packet the way that the students do. Yeah, so it's so important to walk your judge through what you're offering, what's going on in the case in plain language.
With that, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis.
Good afternoon.
My name is Brandon Hughes, and I'm going to ask you some questions on behalf of Happy Land Toy Company, okay?
All right.
I understand that this may be difficult for you. If at any point you need a moment, I'll be perfectly fine with that, okay?
I'll let you know.
Now, on direct examination, you said that Joey was a healthy kid, right?
Yeah, that's right. For the most part, Joey didn't have any health problems other than what I thought was a...
So there's Corellis Bryant. And you guys were facing the mighty NYU team, who had obviously been a powerhouse in recent years. I would imagine that this is one of the rare situations where being the B team full of freshmen who didn't maybe necessarily realize what was happening was probably beneficial to you guys. Did you know what you were up against in that final round when you walked into the courtroom and you saw NYU across the aisle from you? Did you realize who it was?
I mean, I think we knew Corellis was going to be incredible. I can't remember. Had we run into them at a tournament before?
We scrimmaged them.
When did we scrimmage them? Gosh, I
We
don't
scrimmaged them before the tournament actually kicked off, but on the opposite.
Oh, on the other side. That's right. That's right.
So that's really interesting, because I was told that you guys won the coin toss and chose defense. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Did you choose defense because you knew Corellis was a lawyer on the other side?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, we had scrimmaged them on the opposite side. I think our thinking was, if we win the coin toss, we'll go defense, just because our defense record had been, better than the plaintiff record up to that point. So we just, so before I think we even knew who had won the other division, I think we had resolved to do that.
I remember we also spoke, I think, after the fact that it was a good decision to neutralize the number of examinations and scores that Corellis was involved with. But also I remember that maybe this was just me. I was really intimidated by NYU's witness lineup on the other side. I don't know if y'all remember, but their Brett Miller, his name was Erkan. He was so good. He had like a hostile Russian character witness who starts off with some great jokes and then is uncrossable. I thought that guy was amazing. That's the issue. It's like there's so many great people from a decade ago who aren't in videos like this that I wish folks nowadays could see, because that guy, I'm just getting flashbacks to that round. I clearly remember the space we had to scrimmage in. It was amazing.
Breathing trouble every now and then.
Let's talk about that breathing trouble. On October 5th of 2008, you rushed Joey to the emergency room. Isn't that true?
Can we just take a moment
Joey
and this is so early in the round, but this is just one of the earliest examples of Brandon's use of his physicality throughout any round. It's just amazing. And if we get to the closing argument, you're going to see it again. But this use of space that neither I nor probably anybody else I know could really pull off in the same way that Brandon can, where he's crouching and sneaking along like a child, and yet it's totally natural, it's respectful, it's seamless. It's just really awesome to watch. There were times when we were like, maybe we got to scale it back, but I mean, you can probably speak more to this, Brandon. You just would try stuff. You'd sometimes like put a box somewhere and crawl up to the box, and it was really amazing.
I was just having fun with it. I was new and I didn't know like what you couldn't do. Our coach, Gonzalo Freixas, I just remember when we joined the program, he would always just say that kind of what set us apart was that, we were big and we were dynamic, and he would always say, be showy. And, that was my takeaway, I guess, to act out every single thing that I do. And funnily enough, I mean, this round, this is the scaled back performance in terms of like being extra and over the top. There were a lot of things that when our coaches came in, once we got the bid, they're like, I hear you're doing this. I hear you're doing that. Yeah, that's out. But I guess they felt like they had taken so many things away from me. They let me run around in a circle, which was, you know, I think it was a fun closing. And I remember just, you know, for years after, it was like, I have so many good lines in there. I thought I organized it well. Blah, blah. Everybody's like, you're the guy who runs around in a circle.
In trouble on October 5th of 2008, you rushed Joey to the emergency room. Isn't that true?
I took Joey to the emergency room because I couldn't afford a doctor, so it's the only way I could get close to a doctor. So I took him that way.
But he had been having trouble breathing that day, am I right?
From time to time, Joey had some difficulty trying to catch his breath, that's true.
Is that a yes to my question? He had been having trouble breathing that day, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, he had a little trouble catching his breath that day. We had played also.
And he'd been having these issues with his breathing for 1 full year at the time of that visit, am I right?
I mean, I don't know about issues. Ever since he was 8 months, my son would need a little extra time to collect his breath every time we get off the playground. He and I would go and let him relax a little bit till he could breathe a little better.
And you would need him to relax because during these attacks he would wheeze, wouldn't he?
And sometimes he would breathe real deep.
He would cough, am I right?
Yeah.
He would gasp for air, am I right?
Yeah, he would try to get more breath through his little lungs, that's right.
And sometimes if he couldn't, he would clutch his chest in pain, am I right?
Well, he would try to show Daddy what the problem was, letting me know that he couldn't really breathe fully.
Now,
maybe this is to state the obvious, but is Corellis the best sad witness you've ever seen? I mean, maybe the better question is who even comes close?
Definitely up there. I'd say the best crier I've seen, which I think is kind of different. When I coach kids who are playing like the grieving characters or whatever, I tend to want them to dial it back a little bit. I guess I subscribe to the whole, like, you know, it's been a year, it's been 2 years, but definitely the best crier I've ever seen. And they definitely, the dynamic between him and his directing attorney, for anyone who can go and like watch the round, and these cool dramatic moments they put into it were very, very well done.
at that emergency room visit on October 5th of 2008, the doctor said that Joey needs to see a respiratory specialist as soon as possible. Isn't that true?
Well, the doctor said that when I took him to see if I could get some information about it, she said that if it got any worse, and I wanted to know specifically what it is, that she wasn't, I think she said a specialist, so she recommended that I see a breathing specialist to find out exactly what was going on.
I want to make this clear. Is it your testimony that the doctor only said if the problems get worse?
She told me that if I didn't see any improvement, that I should take my kid to a specialist as soon as I could.
Now, you recall receiving a discharge form for Joey from that visit, right?
Yeah, before we left, she gave me a paper of what she had told me.
Would you recognize that paper if I showed it to you?
I mean, you'd have to show it to me, but I think I would recognize it if it's the same one she gave me.
One moment, Mr. Davis. Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Welcome. Now, Mr. Davis, does that look like the discharge paper that was given to you for Joey on October 5th of 2008?
Yeah, it is. This is what Dr. Julie gave me right before we left.
Now, I want you to read silently as I read aloud what's written here by Dr. Julie Brockman. Under the physician's remarks, it says, I discharged patient, but advise parent to see a respiratory specialist as soon as possible and recommended Dr. Borello.
Can I say a couple
Davis,
things?
did I?
All right. Way too close to the judges, which I think was a comment that I got after from the judge that we lost. Way too close to the judges, out of position. I mean, that's why I think this round is a good kind of like teaching round, because you got one side that's like known for having everything kind of clean and knowing how to do everything exactly right. I mean, now if I was coaching, I would definitely tell my student to stand far off in the other direction from where I am standing and not crowd the judges and, you know, the kind of mechanics of the impeachment and everything else. One thing I'd also like to know, that angle on that suit. So I had never really had to wear suits to anything before. This suit, first of all, I don't know how to button it, right? So that's all. But this is straight off the rack from Target. I'm like, we're going to Iowa, let's go to Target. Straight off the rack at Target. I think James had to do my tie knot for me. It was ridiculous. I've come a long way.
Read that correctly.
Yeah, like I said, she told me that if I wanted to know what it was, I should go see Dr. Borello, she said.
So that's a yes to my question. I read that line correctly.
Yeah, you did.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Now, Joey never saw Dr. Borello, right?
No, what Dr. Julia told me, that's also in here, said that if I wanted to know if it was asthma or not, I should go to the specialist because she wasn't able to tell me that. That's in the paragraph above what you read.
My apologies, Mr. Davis. My question wasn't what Dr. Brockman told you. My question was, did Joey ever see Dr. Borello for his breathing issues?
No, I didn't have enough money for a specialist. I thought what Dr. Julia said was fine.
In fact, Joey never saw another doctor of any kind for those breathing issues. Am I right?
That's true. After I met with Dr. Julie, I felt fine with everything.
And you said that Joey started having these attacks around 8 months old?
Yeah, that's right.
And Joey, when he passed away, he was almost 3 years old, right?
Yeah, that's right. Every time we would play, up until he was 2 even, we'd have to take some time to collect his breath, even after the doctor's visit.
So Joey had these issues for 2 years. Am I right?
That's right.
And over those 2 years, Joey only had one doctor's visit. Am I right?
That's right. I only took him to see Dr. Julie.
And at that one doctor's visit, Joey received no treatment. Am I right, Mr. Davis?
You mean like pills?
Pills, an inhaler, any kind of medication to treat his breathing?
No, she didn't give me any pills or nothing like that.
Well, now I'd like to talk to you about the person with whom you trusted Joey on August 8th of 2009.
I love the end of that pocket, right? It's just so clean. 2 years, one doctor's visit, no treatment with the body language to go along with it. And Brandon, I think being so close to the jury means that even though Corellis is very conversational and chatty throughout, it doesn't matter because your body language right in their face makes the point. And his reasonable effort to clarify at the end when he's really just trying to steal the thunder of the last question of the pocket, I don't think hits because you've already made it there and you easily brush away the clarification. I think that's something that some teams that are still figuring it out struggle with. If the witness asks them a question, how do they deal with that?
Also, the fact that he was a little chatty gave me lots of things to latch onto for my follow-up questions. So, it's kind of like trying to show me if he couldn't get breath in his, he's trying to get breath in his lungs, and it doesn't even have to be the exact thing. It's like, okay. And sometimes if he couldn't, and it's just kind of continuing the sentence or continuing the conversation, I think I got more confident as the cross went on. I think that was a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think consistently separates elite competitors from competitors who are very good, but not quite at that like magical level of listening and responsiveness is just how seamlessly they engage with even the smallest details of the case. So, anybody reads these autopsy reports or extra material and sees, fake Easter egg names that are dropped in there. And, you get a chuckle out of it as a competitor, but then you just kind of move on and think in broad strokes about what this document is. This is a discharge form. Okay, so in this discharge form, the doctor gave you some instructions. But instead of saying the doctor, Corellis is already humanizing her as Dr. Julie, and Brandon is seamlessly looping that in and introducing another doctor, Dr. Bo Rello. And so now in the jury's mind, it's like, well, you were going to Dr. Julie, but Dr. Julie said she couldn't solve your problems. You should go see Dr. Rello. And there's so much more of a picture being, drawn in that moment. And only competitors who are truly in the moment and comfortable are able to, loop in those details seamlessly without seeming stilted and without themselves getting thrown off. It's just really exciting to watch that back.
About the person with whom you trusted, Joey, on August 8th of 2009. Now, that was Brett Miller, wasn't it?
I mean, Brett Miller was who I hired as our babysitter, and Brett was there on August 8th, that's right.
And Brett had been babysitting Joey for 1 full year at that point, right?
It was about that long.
And over that year, you noticed that Brett had a tendency to be distracted on the job. Am I right?
I mean, Brett was a college kid, so there was times when I felt like instead of watching TV on Facebook, she should just sit there with the kids, so I told her that.
So that's a yes to my question. Brett would be distracted.
Sometimes, that's true.
Now, you never fired Brett Miller before August 8th of 2009, did you?
No, of course not. Brett was the only babysitter I had.
But on August 8th of 2009, you spoke to Brett Miller, am I right?
When was this?
In the emergency room, did you speak to Brett Miller on August 8th?
Yeah, after Brett had called me, Brett came to the emergency, or told me to go meet her at the emergency room, and I spoke to her there.
And you told her you were supposed to watch Joey. You were supposed to watch my son. If you had been paying attention, this never would have happened. Did you make that statement, Mr. Davis?
That's right. I told her that.
And Brett Miller told you, I'm sorry, Andy. I'm so sorry. It's my fault. Did she make that statement to you, Mr. Davis?
Brett told me that too.
Now I'd like to talk to you about the princess beads. Your daughter Hillary always kept the princess beads loose on the living room coffee table. Isn't that true?
She would play with them there and leave the beads out. That's true.
And that living room coffee table, they left the princess beads within Joey's reach, right?
Yeah, Hillary kept them on the table. That's right. So when I was in the living room, I could watch her.
So as you were watching, you would watch Joey reach for the beads, right?
There was some times when I would see him playing with it, and like I said, I would yell at him and then move him.
In addition to reaching for them and playing with.
So here's my question. Were you guys at all concerned that this was going to be polarizing?
I didn't know enough to be concerned.
So I guess
concerned as a coach now.
Yeah, I guess the better question is, Amanda, were you concerned at the time this was going to be polarizing?
You're acting as if I have this like experience and authority on this team that I really do not. I mean, I think we were all holding our breath at various moments of trial whenever we would do something that was a little unconventional or a little rough around the edges. The kneeling in front of the jury was definitely one of those moments that could have gone either way. I think for one judge, it probably went very poorly, but for most of them, I think they were mesmerized. Like I am watching it back. I think it's such a pivotal moment for this cross.
And what we're not, I'm sorry, Phil, go ahead.
Had you guys gotten any negative feedback in previous rounds on this kind of stuff?
Not that I remember.
Well, we didn't really have a jury box for a lot of our previous rounds. So many of our rounds have been in like classrooms and, sometimes the mechanics weren't always the same.
Well, listen, what's not happening in this round, Phil, is I'm not going to counsel table and retrieving from behind the counsel table an actual coffee table from my home and dumping it in the middle of the well, which I believe we did at Orcs, maybe, or
regionals.
It was in we did that. LA, wherever that was. Maybe it was regionals. So we didn't always have the courtrooms, but There were times where we just brought our own coffee table. So
All right.
There
So
were times when Brandon was almost eating the beads. At what point did you put those in your mouth at some point?
this is a fun team.
so we we can't gloss over this. So what with the coffee table? Can we rewind like a minute and can you tell that story?
Yeah, I don't know if it was regionals or orcs. I mean, it was something in LA because I knew I could get there. And I just took a table from my mom's house and I just put it in the trunk and I drove it to the site. And me and the opener on our side in this round, Alex, I think he was riding with me, and we just walked into the, wherever it was being held, and we're just like, yeah. And I just had this big like table, and we used it. We used it for the defense rounds for that tournament. So we set it there, and we set the beads on it, and then I did the whole thing. But
and no one said anything, like not your teammates, not your coaches, not the other team. They weren't just like, hey, what's that
we hadn't
coffee
gotten
table?
to nationals yet, so we just had the one coach. And
yeah, we just had Nate, right? I think Nate enabled us quite a bit.
It was a good time. It was a good time.
Then you would see him touch them, right?
Yeah, he would touch them sometime.
You would see him pick them up and try and put them in his mouth.
Yeah, he would try. I mean, when I was there, it didn't happen because I would stop him.
And you mentioned on direct examination, you would see him try and put things together himself with the princess beads, right?
Put things together?
Try to put them together himself. Do you remember saying that on direct examination?
Yeah, he played with the beads. He did.
But at no point were those princess beads moved.
That's a strange clarification from Corellis. I think that at this point, Brandon, you're neutralizing Corellis, that it's far enough away from the climax of the direct that he's not really keeping it up. And I think the most consistent characterization he has here is he's a nice, hardworking dad, but he's not getting that level back that he had. I think at this clarification, if I were scoring the round, I'd probably drop him a point on cross because it's just not helpful.
Put things together?
Try to put them together himself. Do you remember saying that on direct examination?
Yeah, he played with the beads. He did.
But at no point were those princess beads moved off of that coffee table within Joey's reach to a place in the home out of Joey's reach. Am I right?
No, I told Hillary to keep them in the living room where I could watch her, and I would always move Joey, who wasn't in the living room with older people.
That's a no to my question. You yourself never moved those beads out of Joey's reach, did you?
No, we had them in the living room on the coffee table, and that's where they always were.
And that would be a no, right, Mr. Davis?
I'm sorry?
That would be a no to my question. Am I right, Mr. Davis? The beads were never moved off of that table and out of Joey's reach. Yes or no, Mr. Davis?
No, we kept them on the coffee table.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have nothing further for this witness.
Thank you. Redirect.
That ending was weird because he had already agreed with me. I don't know if I just didn't hear him, and that's why I tried to control on it or something. But every time I watch, like I always notice our coach, actually Borello, in the background. It's like I ask the question, he says exactly what we need him to say, and I can see him in the stands going, and I just keep going. But luckily, I mean, because you got to know when to stop, because then a good witness can kind of unravel everything you've done. But luckily, that didn't really happen there.
One thing that I want to note is Corellis being really conversational helped Brandon in that this cross was very by the book. You'd perfected this from at least Miami, if not regionals. This was basically the same script as far as I know, which just goes after the two big things. Joey couldn't breathe all that well, and Brett Miller was not a good babysitter, and you knew it. And the fact that some random words that he would put in the conversational response looped into your next question made it seem like you were more responsive with the cross than the scripted cross actually was. And I thought that's interesting to note. I didn't note that before playing it back.
Or you have things that are just, are always going to come up on direct, So it's like scripted in your cross, but it's like, yeah, like you told us on direct examination. And, it sounds like you're playing off of something that just happened, but, you're not. So actual responsiveness and that illusion of responsiveness, at least when I'm judging, I give high marks for that.
So the next thing that we're going to watch is in your case, in the defense's case in chief, your first witness, which was played by Iain. The witness's name was Quinn Brown. And Amanda already laughing. We haven't even started watching and already the laughs. What was I think, Iain, you said that this was a witness you didn't always do?
That's right.
What happened that made it in this round you called this witness?
So it's not even that I didn't always do the witness. It's that I was not in the majority of rounds from regionals on. I performed as plaintiff Quinn Brown, which I thought was a much stronger factual witness for this case. Once at regionals, plaintiff Quinn Brown, once at Orcs. And then at that time, they had promoted the plaintiff Quinn Brown to be in both rounds, both prelims at nationals. But what we did is, in the first defense round, we called Brown. In the second, we called Lexington, played by Jake Perkowski. Lexington was the CEO. He's got the damning statement of, I wanted these beads quickly and cheaply and whatever it takes. And the thinking, as far as I understood it, was the Lexington cross is a slam dunk. Jake was able to hold up better than we'd ever seen a Lexington hold up against Harvard's B team. But we didn't want to chance it in the final round to get those really damning lines from the CEO on the record. And I think having my Brown there as a funnier character was a Hail Mary and kind of a chaos play because, maybe the cross doesn't hit, maybe it does, but we were pretty sure the Lexington cross was at least going to be a 9.
So I've never told Iain this. I'm going to say it now on the show for the first time. So in 2014, when UCLA won the national championship again, and it was Iain's second national championship, was Delaware's, where I went to school, our first time at nationals ever. And I was a junior. And Delaware had never been good, so we had never gotten invited to like the big stuff. So we didn't really interact with all of the good schools throughout the course of the year. This was our first time really on a big stage. So it's round 1, we're in Orlando, and we're at the captain's meeting. I walk into the captain's meeting, it was in some courtroom. And I'm looking around and like it hits me that like we're at nationals. Like, this is crazy. It's our first time here. I've never been here. And I like look to the corner of the room and I see Iain. And I knew who Iain was because I'd seen this video like a million times at that point. But I'd never seen him like in person. And it was like it was like one of the most starstruck feelings I've ever had. And I was like, obviously I was at the captain's meeting. So the rest of my team was back at the hotel or wherever they were. And I was texting them like, oh my God, Iain is in the room with me right now. Like, we're here, we're at nationals. And then I snapped this picture of Iain. I found it in my group. There it is.
Wow.
I was like, he's here. You may not believe me, but here is a picture of Iain.
Also, I remember that haircut. That was, yeah.
That was, so I got a buzz cut specifically for nationals because it was too big at Orcs. And I think it was Mike Kelly, who was our coach at the time. Gonzalo was the program director. Mike is the targeted A team coach. Brandon was also coaching us, and a lot of that closing in the 2014 final is due to Brandon's rhetoric, I think. Anyway, I think Mike Kelly is the one who helped a lot with that buzz cut. Retrospectively, I don't know what I was thinking, but that's what was covering my brain.
So I mean, Iain would go on after this round to become, I think, one of the most well-known and well-credentialed decorated competitors ever. But at this point, this was, you weren't even in every round, it sounds like.
No, this was my second round ever playing Brown on the defense at a tournament.
Yeah, and what was really interesting too is that, like, I remember the plaintiff version that you did more wasn't as joke heavy as this one. Maybe because there was more substantive, info to get out. But yeah, I didn't have much involvement in this at all. So I remember when we started doing this, I was seeing it often, for the first time, and just amazing stuff.
So Brandon and Amanda, at what point did you realize this zany freshman witness was going to be a huge star?
Well, I actually remember meeting Iain for the first time in a darkened nighttime quad outside of a residence hall with one of the coaches, Nate. And this was early on in the year, or maybe mid-year, it might have been December or something. And I think Iain was like, I don't know, I'm just really busy. I'm coaching speech and debate. Like I have, a life and school. Like, I just don't know if I can dedicate time to mock trial. And like, I'm in this conversation thinking like, yeah, I've been there. I just quit mock trial, for this semester. And like, I'm just thinking of coming back now, but we'll just have some fun. But I remember Nate saying like, Iain is unbelievable and you should see him do a speech, like you should see him close, but at a minimum, at least being a witness, it's a little bit less of a time commitment. He's going to be amazing. And indeed, when Iain joined our team, it was, obvious. He had all the qualities that we wanted: a little zaniness, a little risk taking, a lot of responsiveness, creativity, a tremendous like absorber of information, and obviously, tremendous talent. So.
And I think the one thing that also makes this thing work so well is the pairing with James. It's just like quintessential, like James is just, it's just the quintessential like straight man, right? And like, so just the dynamic is so good.
What year was James? Was he also a freshman at this point?
Sophomore this year.
Yeah. So
Okay.
wait, Iain, were you our only freshman? Because Brandon, were you a sophomore?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was my second year doing that. Yeah.
And then Megan was a sophomore, or was she?
Yeah, Megan was a sophomore, and then she did it again as a junior. Carol was a senior. Jake was a senior.
Alex was a junior, like me. Yeah.
Yeah.
James, so young. He seems so young in this video too.
The defense calls Quinn Brown to the stand.
Who are you waving to?
The audience in general. This is due to Bill Vizone, who is the character witness for NYU, who went right before me in the break, got the audience laughing like crazy when Brandon alluded to one of our attorneys being punished by going a little off script with a witness. Alex Hill can normally wrangle any witness off script, but Bill had a really good one-liner prepped that was a total inside baseball mock trial joke about Joe Resnick, who I think was Amanda's co-counsel when you won Law School Nationals, right?
Yes, indeed.
Small world.
Bill Vizone was also my coach at Top Gun, so there's just like a lot of.
But yeah, basically, because Bill Vizone got the audience riled up with a bunch of good jokes, I felt comfortable doing a joke on the way up to the stand.
I remember walking into Top Gun in Waco in 2017 and seeing like Brandon, Amanda, I think James was there, and Bill, and I was like, they're all here. The entire round is here. Like, it was crazy.
The whole time, and it's so funny. None of us hit each other. Did you hit James, Amanda?
No. I hit Phil, right?
Yes.
And then, I hit both of the guys that ended up competing in the final round. Had a really sad draw.
Yeah.
And you didn't see him. Did you see the Georgetown guy though, Matt Covert?
I did not. Were you asking Brandon?
Yeah, I was asking Brandon, but.
Oh yeah. I played. Well, I can't remember if I played him that year or the year prior, but I played him once. Yeah, who was the opener for 2013
Yeah.
AMTA Nationals.
Yeah.
So if you've been there, you know that the way it works is you go to this long dinner the first night, and then they give you your first 2 round pairings. And I was telling my coach in second chair at the time, like, anybody but those three, like anybody with those 3 is fine with me. And of course it's like round 2, Amanda. And I was like, oh man. And that was a fun round though.
Yeah. But then Bill became a very decorated Top Gun competitor. So, and I did not.
Or did I?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated.
May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Quinn Isaac Brown.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Brown?
I'm currently employed as a project leader at the Happy Land Toy Company.
Could you tell us how you got involved in toy design?
when I was a child, my mother never allowed me to play with any toys. She always used to tell me that joy was bad for my asthma. So I made it my life's mission to give other children what I was never allowed. Fun.
Mr. Brown, could you tell us how you get started as a project leader for
James
Happy
is
Land
not
Toy
even
Company?
bothered. He's like, all right, shut up.
Who wrote the jokes?
So a lot of these jokes, that's Jake Perkowski, who was sitting at council table as our Lexington and had just come off an amazing last round of competitive mock trial where he opened against Ben Wallace and out-opened him, I think. And, you know, Ben is, as we all know, phenomenal. This was Jake just breaking his limiter and rising above. But a lot of people don't realize the extent to which he was involved, not only in, as Amanda said, I was really burnt out going into college and I quit the team at a point, and Jake and others helped get me back on it as this backup witness. He was loving and caring and welcoming, great guy, really funny, fantastic joke writer. And so almost all the jokes in this are Jake. And I think that should be recognized.
I was hired in 2004 as a project leader, and well, I've had my job ever since.
Are you familiar with a product called the Princess Beads?
Yes, actually, I designed that particular toy.
Why am I
It was
so
my
surprised
idea,
by
yes.
this? It's like, wait, you here to ask me about the princess beads? I thought I was here for a DUI. It's a very strange character choice, I know.
I never noticed it, but like James plays so well off of you. He's just like not even like fazed by anything that's happening around him. He just like they're there to ask the questions.
Job ever since.
Are you familiar with a product called the Princess Beads?
Yes, actually, I designed that particular toy. It was my idea, yes.
How'd you come up with that idea?
My mother would always call me her little princess. Possibly because she was nearsighted and I did have a sister. So I started making my sister jewelry to wear so my mother could tell us apart. I called that the Princess Beads. That's how the idea was birthed.
Well, could you tell us about the design of the toy? What was the design of the Princess Beads?
The Princess Beads are essentially a make-it-your-own jewelry set, but instead of using string, you arrange them however you please. You spray them with water, you let them get sticky and harden, and...
So, were you doing this shtick throughout the season?
Yeah, I was barely brown throughout the season. I was doing the Princess Beads description, though, in every round. I also think I want to call attention to two things. One are the jokes that are not being said here. I had a version of this that had twice as many jokes that we scrubbed a good number from after a scrimmage against Justin Bernstein's UC Irvine team. And the second thing here is James, right? Not only is James not fazed by any of the jokes here, he's just keeping it professional, but especially as people go back to in-person mock trial, I think that a lot of people don't know where to move on direct. They stand next to the jury box the whole time. They don't make use of the space. I think James is doing a really good job letting the witness be the star of the show, but moving very purposefully, not at every pocket, because there's only two big lines of questioning here, but on every sub pocket. I just noticed that as well. I don't think I noticed that in the round at the time because I was really just focusing on the jury.
So one of the things that's shocking to when you think about this as a B team is, I mean, lots of really good programs have really good attorneys. And I do still think it's crazy that James and Brandon and Alex, you guys were so deep that they couldn't crack your A team's bench. But what's even stranger to me is that Iain and Amanda, the two of you could not crack the A team witness bench. I mean, were they just seeing this in practice and were like, not good enough? We're all set. Like, what was going on in practice and scrimmages? And they saw the two of you, and was there any consideration of bringing you up for Orcs Day?
We didn't really reshuffle too much between A and B for Orcs in the way that I think a lot of programs now might. Sometimes people would get pulled up from C. So when I was on C team, I got pulled up to maybe witness or maybe be a middle on B at Orcs at some point. But never really between A and B. And like Iain, I had quit the program at the beginning of this year. And so like it was a real struggle to even get back on the team. And, you know, by the good graces of the coaches and Jake, I'm sure was instrumental in this. They're like, yeah, we'll take you on the B team as like a middle and a witness and just, you know, see what happens. And so I don't think I was on anybody's radar, certainly not for A that year.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Something interesting about the A team Quinn Brown, though. This is some deep lore. Trengapo was his name, and he was a great witness. Exactly. So his Princess Beads origin story, all of our Browns had a different one, was that the Princess Beads were inspired by gulab jamun, which if you never had it before, you know, delicious treat. And UCLA swept Irvine at the downtown tournament. This is UCLA A. We were not on that team, but I've seen the footage of it. After that happened, Justin prepped the Irvine team specifically to cross that Quinn Brown, who was on the defense, as, so let's get this straight. You've created this toy, right? Yeah. And you don't want kids to eat this toy, of course. You would do anything to make sure that the kids wouldn't eat the toy, right? Yeah. You said you designed the toy after gulab jamun, a tasty dessert. And that helped frame all their crosses in that round. And so I think that speaks to importance of adaptation and considering the implications of using a character's backstory in the context of a cross. Right now, I think there's a good meta of top-level attorneys bantering with the character about the backstory at the start, or I'm going to let you get back to your TV show later. I just have a few questions kind of level. But I think that more can go that one level deeper and use it to make an offensive cross point.
You're beautiful.
How did you get the Princess Beads to stick after just spraying them with water?
We used a chemical for that, a butane diol.
Did you consider any other chemicals for that purpose?
For some time, we were considering a chemical called pentane diol, but if you sprayed the beads with water, when they were coated in that, they swelled up. And that presented a choking hazard. So we made the switch to butane diol because not only was it cheaper, but most importantly, it was a lot safer.
Objection, improper opinion.
No pending question.
Mr. Brown, how could you be sure that butane diol was safe?
Well,
Objection calls for an improper opinion.
I love that.
Yes, you may.
That's all.
Yeah, I mean, so the judge, like, very unfairly, I think, shut down this objection right away. So she's obviously objecting to what sounds like an improper opinion in Iain's answer. And the judge is like, well, there's no question. So
right,
naturally, there could never be an improper opinion.
If you look towards earlier AMTA cases, this judge is on the panel. There's an older judge who has a really deep voice. He sounds kind of like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. But I don't know what happened to that judge, but this guy was just, you know, in the jury at that time. And I think that after nationals stopped being held in Des Moines every year, we lost that continuity of these are the judges, probably for the best.
Right.
There's a lay witness opinion, which is relevant for purposes of assessing breach of duty.
I'll allow him to answer to the extent you asked him how safe it was.
How he could be sure it was safe.
I'll let him answer that question.
How could you be sure that the butane diol was safe?
Well, I received a risk assessment from the company's chief officer, Miss Erin Swift, and in that assessment she talked about butane diol, and I read it, so that's how I knew.
Permission to approach the witness with Plaintiff 6?
You may.
Mr. Brown, I'm handing you what's been previously entered as Plaintiff 6. Do you recognize it?
Yes, this is a forwarded message from our company's CEO, Mr. Lexington, forwarded on from Erin Swift.
In that email, does Erin Swift make any recommendations about the design process?
We should have had a demo.
She says...
Should have had a blow up for this for sure. We didn't have the budget for it, but I think that now considering the age of online mock, we definitely show this and then do that zoom in to this part.
Well, didn't NYU on in Bill's Direct have blowups of certain emails? I guess it just wasn't this one.
He did. I don't know if it was this one or not. I do not remember.
Yeah, because they had a bunch of blowups of like a bunch of emails. I don't remember what they were.
To be safe, the butane dial should not be used in any item that's intended for consumption by humans. It should not be used in any product that might foreseeably be eaten. And she also talks about including warning labels on the Princess Beads packaging.
Did you follow those recommendations?
Yes, we did.
Then I'd like to take those 2 areas of advice and look at them one at a time so we can all really understand how they impacted your design decisions. But first of all, how did you make sure that children wouldn't eat the princess beads?
We coated each and every princess bead in a very bitter chemical taste deterrent called denatonium.
As bitter as it may be, how could you be certain it would be effective?
Well, for that, we conducted separate testing. We compared 25 different chemical taste deterrents to see what would keep children most effectively from eating princess beads.
Could you explain to the members of the jury that testing in a little more detail?
Sure. We tested 25 different chemicals, and for each test, we used a group of 2-year-olds, and we coated various objects in the various chemicals. We showed princess beads, Legos, action figures, and my personal collection of pet rocks.
What did you observe while you were doing all that testing?
We found that denatonium was by far the most effective chemical. With denatonium, only one single child swallowed one single princess bead, and after that, he wouldn't even go near one again.
That brings us to the other thing you said Aaron Swift advised you on, which was warning labels. Did you put warning labels on the princess beads packaging?
Oh, yes. We used every warning that Ms. Swift recommended, and then some.
May the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as Defense B?
Without objection.
Permission to approach the witness with the same?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Brown, I'm handing you what's been previously marked as Defense B. Do you recognize it?
It's the Princess Beads box.
Defense moves in exhibit.
That's actually an
evidence. Exhibit B.
One time we were facing Irvine D at regionals, and there Quinn Brown got the Princess Beads box. The same question asked, "What is this?" And I don't remember the guy's name, but I remember his enthusiasm. He gets it. He goes, "It's a box!" And we made that a recurring joke the rest of the season.
I do remember that.
And before the round, I remember asking someone on the team if I should do the same thing. And so they say no, so I'm extra sedate in responding to that. And I actually think that works against the character, because the level of enthusiasm they had at the start being asked about the princess beads should carry over to when I actually get to see the box itself. I think this is a flaw in the portrayal.
So explain to the people that are watching what the actual exhibit was. This was something a little bit different about this case when compared to some later ones.
Yeah, it's a physical box. I think in the mock trial case packet itself, it's one of those fold out things that you might get in an arts and crafts kids book. So you have to put it together. They didn't ship you a box yourself. I think you had to make the box. And I was about to answer a different question here about what some people did with the actual beads, but I didn't see those rounds directly. I think Brandon and Amanda saw some crazy stuff people did with the beads. That's just what the box was itself.
I was just gonna say, I think that box might be at my mom's house. Still, I think it was like
that in an office somewhere. That's a relic.
Yeah, you really could make a lot of money for charity with that box. So people did weird stuff with the beads too?
Well, at one point, it wasn't really clear what you were and weren't allowed to do with beads. So they came in these like plastic baggies, and people were opening them up and pouring them into things. And Brandon might have put a bead in his mouth at one point, or maybe Alex did. It seems like an Alex thing. But people were doing weird stuff with beads. And I think eventually they made everybody keep them in a plastic bag of some sort, which was boring but safer, I suppose.
I think the two things about the box I'm remembering now, I think they're both Joe Resnick's things, and I don't know if they're real stories or not, so you can confirm or deny, but these are the rumors, right? The first was during one of his crosses, he would get the box, and the warning labels are on the bottom of the box, which is one of the flaws that the plaintiff can cross the defense about. There's no warning labels along the top, so it's harder for a family to see when they get the box itself. So what he would do is he would go, allegedly, far back into the edge of the courtroom, pick up the box, and then say, "Hey, Mr. Brown, can you see the warning labels?" And then he'd take a step forward. "How about now?" And then it would lead up to a point, and this is, again, all hearsay about what he did, where he'd put them onto a table and say, "How about now?" And at that point, no, of course you can't see the warning labels. The other thing that people would do with the beads was eat them in the middle of the trial, eat these little plastic beads. Something like, they think that they're so dangerous. It's not so bad. It's fine. I'm okay.
Exhibit B is admitted.
You said you put warning labels on that box, but could you show us where they are?
We put warning labels on the front of the box, on the back of the box, and a lot of them on the bottom of the box.
With so many warnings on the bottom, weren't you concerned that parents might not notice them?
No.
Objection argumentative, Your Honor, as to so many warnings.
Overruled. Answer no will stand. Ask another question.
James is just like so cool, like just standing there, like not bothered at all, just totally unfazed by everything that's happening.
This freeze frame is quintessential James.
Just ice in his veins.
Why weren't you concerned that parents might not notice warnings if they were on the bottom?
We sold the Princess Beads box exclusively online. And
What an
online, you can
invention.
see all sides of the box.
What a lie.
What did you say?
It's not true. I say I sold them all online. How does that make sense? What is this artisanal, mass-produced Happyland toy company go on Shark Tank? "Hello, sharks. How are you selling them?" "Our distribution is all online right now. We're not in big box stores, even though we literally sell boxes." Doesn't make any sense. Could have impeached.
I wonder why they didn't.
Beads box exclusively online. And online, you can see all sides of the box, including the bottom and all of the text on the warning labels. So, no, that wasn't a concern of ours at all.
To be clear, did all the warning labels on that box appear on your website?
Yes, they do.
What warning labels are on that box?
There are two kinds. We have age-related labels and consumption-related labels.
All right, let's take those one at a time. What do the age-related labels say?
It's so
The
begrudging.
age-related labels say,
All right, talk about your stupid box.
James is like, I've had it with structure. All right, let's take those one at a time.
consumption-related labels.
All right, let's take those one at a time. What do the age-related labels say?
The age-related labels say that the Princess Beads are only for children ages 9 and up, and absolutely not for children ages 0 to 3. They communicate a message that I've known for a long time. Happiness is not for everyone.
You said there were also consumption-related labels. What do those say?
These say choking hazard, not for consumption, and may be toxic if swallowed.
Mr. Brown, could you tell us if at any time during your design procedure you'd found evidence the Princess Beads were unsafe, would you still sold them to the public?
Absolutely not. That's why we only sold the beads when we were sure that they were safe. After we had tested with denatonium and put all of the warning labels on the box, we felt comfortable with putting the Princess Beads on the market.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. No further questions, Your Honor. Permission to approach and tender.
The thing to note is my body language changes throughout that examination. I start off far back here. I end, part of this because I'm putting a box on a desk, but I'm leaning forward like this. And I think that's for two reasons. The first is I become a conduit to a bunch of hearsay for the second half of this examination, and there's a few jokes that are sparkled in there, and it's admissible, but my job is to then just basically give a bunch of facts that Brandon can close on. And second, I think I'm now in the zone where I personally felt less comfortable because I knew there was nothing else that the audience was going to really latch onto throughout the majority of the second half of the direct. So I had to then lean in. And I guess I literally leaned in to being more professional.
Criticisms aside, Iain, I think most people would say if you polled them right now that that was the best character witness portrayal that anyone's ever done. I mean, did you feel when you left the stand that it was that good?
No, not at all. And I still don't think that. I think that it's fine.
Amanda, Brandon, do you guys agree?
I mean, one thing I really love about Iain's characters, and it's something that I'm very bad at character witnesses. I don't like crossing them. I definitely can't play them, and I'm really bad at coaching them. But what I try to tell students is, your character can't just be an accent. Like, there's got to be some backstory, and it's great when the backstory is only slightly untethered from the case. And that is what Iain created, right? He creates a character who has kind of a quirky backstory that makes sense for why he's a toy designer, but not in any of the predictable, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory type of ways that you would imagine some quirky toy designer to be, especially when you need him to be sort of a credible, professional-ish witness. I just think that's such a masterclass in how to craft some type of character outside the case that still makes sense and doesn't just rely on a voice.
How are you guys feeling at this point in the trial? This is now witness one for the defense. We are about 60% of the way through. Were you guys starting to feel like, okay, this can happen? Or did you feel like you were ahead at that point?
I don't know if I felt like we were ahead. Some of the parts that we haven't seen from this round so far were still very, very strong from the plaintiff. I think at this point, I remember thinking, okay, we are in this. We're definitely not losing this round. It might be a very close round, almost certainly, but I felt like we were taking some of that momentum back.
So the next thing we're going to watch is the cross-examination of the witness that Amanda portrayed, and that was the defense expert, Dr. Gardner. And it's going to sound like I'm just saying this, like I'm throwing out a lot of like the best ever in this, but I really do mean this when I say, I think this is the best performance of a witness on cross-examination I've ever seen. I would tell witnesses that I was coaching to go back and watch that, just like watch that part of that video and watch Amanda say, no, 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 no. And I actually tell clients this in real life, like the best answer you can give is no, or that's not exactly right, or you're not helping yourself by volunteering additional information. I think bad witnesses on cross sometimes just want to talk, evade. And no was really the best answer you can give on cross. And this is just the quintessential, this is a better explanation of that than any coach could ever give.
Best cross performance. I'll say it. Phenomenal stuff. It's funny, the opener in that round, Alex was the expert on the other side. He was also a very, very difficult expert to tangle with. But yeah, this performance was phenomenal.
And it capped off Amanda not only getting the final round All-American, but a 19 rank against top competitors, like top seeded for a good portion of it the whole way All-American. And I wish that this round, that another round was as popular as this one. It's the one where you're crossed by Chris Ballesteros, Amanda, because she was just on fire dealing with any Gardner cross. Like anytime anyone deviated even slightly from the exact wording of the affidavit, her Gardner would just stomp them. And she got better and better throughout the season, but especially at nationals, it was just on fire.
Hey, you were the top ranked witness at nationals that year with 19 ranks. You were an attorney on the other side. What did you like better?
I don't know. I felt really good. I felt really good as a witness, I think, because Brandon was directing me. I just think we just vibed in the way that I hadn't with other directing attorneys before. So that was especially fun. It was fun to be an attorney on the other side because in our round against UVA, we had a nice Post-it factory going with like modifying their demos with chains of Post-its with Jake and me. So that was fun. But being a witness this round was definitely a highlight.
Explanation for Joey's death.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
Very well. You may cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like the exhibit to remain up?
Yes, I ask that you turn it around and I'll turn it back around during the cross-examination.
Sure. Do you want me to remove it entirely? Will you be using it, or?
I will be using it.
Okay.
There's an interesting little tonal clash between the advocates in that moment, that might be indicative of the larger stylistic clash in the round. The middle attorney, I think her name is Delia, is very professional and very proper about, I ask that you turn it around. And Brandon's like, well, are you going to be using it, or are you going to? And I think that, not to err on the side of being overly casual, but I happen to think that the kind of raw style plays. And I think that's regardless of where you are in the country, that style seems to play.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I think part of that is just a lot of it's natural. And it's tough because you're telling students, particularly new students, you want to be polished and you want to make sure that you're really poised, but at the same time, don't be too poised. So that's really tough. I think what I tell my students, at least, is if you get an opportunity to have a lighthearted moment, to make a joke, to smile, to laugh at yourself, you need to take it, because it gives you an opportunity to not be that overly polished, overly poised competitor and so professional and so serious. But some competitors are just more natural at it than others, and Brandon is certainly at the top of that list.
May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Gardner, this is not your first time testifying in court, is it?
No, it's not.
Well, like you told us on your direct, you've actually testified in over 40 court cases. Isn't that right?
I have.
Doctor, as a medical professional, well, you're a member of several organizations, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
You're a member of the Midlands Association for Civil Defense Lawyers.
Oh, yes, I'm a member of a number of attorney associations.
The National Association for Criminal Defense Attorneys?
That's right, along with one for California and New York.
Doctor, you're also a member of the American Association of Corporations. Isn't that right?
Right, my consulting firm is a corporation.
Dr. Gardner, in the over 40
Is it
court
though?
cases where you've taken that stand.
Is my consulting firm a corporation? Nobody knows.
I saw my eyebrows go up at that.
I can't remember who I definitely didn't come up with that on my own. I either saw another Gardner do it, or I might have, maybe Brandon, you came up with that. That was not a me thing.
I think that, though, now what you said in that round is true, because Phil, you can maybe confirm this better than I can. Gardner Consulting is still used sometimes in AMTA, right?
I don't know. I've never seen, not in the cases that I've read, I've never seen that character recur.
I don't think it's the character. I think that the firm, Gardner Consulting, has been referenced.
I've not. I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't, but I've never seen that.
All right, everyone on YouTube and mock trial memes, if you can find Gardner Consulting, find it, because if there is a Gardner Consulting and that it is a legal entity and it's not just this particular Gardner, then Amanda is vindicated.
That's right. And just while we have this pause, I can't go this whole episode without saying this. There's young Justin Bernstein right there behind Cindy's head in the middle. There he is, and next to him to his left is Justin Matarese. So, and I think that's Gonzalo, 2 down from Justin, right? Is that right? I think that's Gonzalo right there.
Yeah.
So
Morello is kind of tucked behind Pat, and Keith
right.
to the left of Gonzalo. Yeah.
Association of Corporations. Isn't that right?
Right. My consulting firm is a corporation.
Dr. Gardner, in the over 40 court cases where you've taken that stand, where you've testified to the jury, how many times have you testified for the plaintiff or the prosecution?
Oh, never. Of all the times I've been retained by the plaintiff or prosecution, the cases usually settle, or they don't end up calling me at trial.
So, Doctor, by pure coincidence, every
that
case...
I'm like particularly pumped made it into the cross, because I think this is a line that my dad had suggested to make it sound like I'm just so good that the defense always has to settle when I'm hired by the plaintiff. And so I don't think we had run that before nationals. I think that was like a new one-liner.
You have worked for the plaintiff, you haven't testified in court?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative as to pure coincidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
I wouldn't say pure coincidence. The state usually has their own expert, so it's very rare, in fact, that I am ever hired by the plaintiff.
So, Dr. Gardner, for every time that you've taken the stand, every time you've testified to the jury, it has always been for the defense.
That's right.
In this case, you were hired by the defense. You were hired by Happy Land Toy Corporation.
I was.
They're paying you your standard fee, $800 per hour.
Standard in my field, you're right.
Well, before you took the stand today, you'd worked about 35 hours on this case, hadn't you?
Yes, I have.
So before you took the stand, Happy Land had already agreed to pay you $28,000.
For all the work I've done, you're right.
Well, let's talk about the work that you were hired to do. Now, Doctor, you told us that there are several different things that could have caused Joey's death, right?
Oh, I didn't say that there were several different things.
Well, Your Honor, Ms. Gardner, you told us that you examined 3 different possibilities, right?
No, I didn't say that either.
Doctor, you didn't examine 3 different possibilities?
No, what I said was when I reviewed all of the documents, the evidence I found there led me to focus on 3 different parts of my analyses.
So, Doctor, that's a yes to my question? You're focused on 3?
It's almost like those are 3 possibilities.
You know what's so funny though? Like every time I watch it, I'm like, well, so was it 3? Or like I'm still not sure a decade later. Like, was it 3 or not?
I'm not sure.
Possibilities and 3 parts of my analyses are different things. They're different things. What I love about the way that you do this though is that early kind of bias stuff that you know is going to happen, and a lot of it doesn't really hit anyway. It's like you build up that credibility kind of stockpile by just yeah, you're right. And then when you get to the meat of it, that's when you start pushing back. And you've already kind of built that reserve of kind of like, okay, I'm not a person who's going to be, getting into fisticuffs on every question, but now we're into the science and now I'm going to push back. And I think you kind of built up a credibility reserve, before they got to the meat of the cross. I thought that was really nice.
It makes you seem way more reasonable when you're just agreeable on the stuff that's you should agree to. And then when they make a mistake, you correct them. And I thought that's what made these answers so painful.
I also love Amanda's prosody, right? Just the rhythm with which she answers questions, because it's not as if she's fluctuating a lot with inflection or tone. It's what she's really doing is taking those important beats, even if the beat is really small in the middle of the sentence. And I realize that more and more, when I have to communicate something clearly to someone else, I feel like I'm doing a bit of an Amanda as an expert impression.
Oh.
Different possibilities.
I reviewed a number of possibilities.
Counsel is misstating the evidence. Dr. Gardner did not testify to 3 possible causes of death. She testified to 3 focuses of her investigation, one not directly relating to a cause of death. That's where the confusion lies.
Overruled. Cross-examination.
Doctor, you focused on 3 different possibilities for how Joey Davis may have died in this case. Isn't that right?
No, I reviewed a number of possibilities and I presented 3 conclusions today.
Okay, Doctor. Well, the 3 things that you did look at were a household object possibly causing Joey's poisoning, right?
It's one of the possibilities I considered.
I realized you could have avoided that whole 5-question back and forth if she just said it as a statement. Like, you talked about these 3 things, let's go through them one at a time.
Right. It always worries me when you have to like read back a witness an answer in a mock trial, because it makes me think of the thing that happened in your final Iain with Kyle. When there was a court reporter for like the first time ever and the only time ever probably, and he had the court reporter read it back and it was like a whole thing. But it always worries me when you have to like remind a witness of something they said and they're like, well, I didn't say that. And then you're kind of stuck because there's no way to prove who's right.
I want to highlight something that Justin mentioned. This is Justin Bernstein, about the importance of using headers to like get to the brink of being argumentative without going over that line. When you say, no, I'd like to talk about whether or not you're a terrible murderer kind of stuff. And I think that just the use of a argumentative header here that didn't cross the line would have saved so much grief. But Amanda was able to really shine by sticking to this thing in a way that felt like an expert clarifying her testimony without being overly fighty with an attorney.
Causing Joey's death.
Right.
Doctor, you also told us that Joey's death, well, it didn't fit the timeline that you would expect to see for a case of GHB poisoning, right?
Oh, it not only doesn't fit the timeline, but it doesn't fit the typical progression.
Well, let's take each one of those one step at a time. Let's start with another household object. Now, you told us that Joey could have swallowed something else, and that's what caused his GHB poisoning?
Given the emergency room report, it's very clear that he swallowed something other than the beads.
Doctor, you reviewed Joey's toxicology screen in this case, didn't you?
I did.
On that toxicology screen, you saw that Joey had 148 milligrams per liter of GHB in his blood.
That's right.
Doctor, the only product that was consistent with that toxicology screen, well, it wasn't another household object, right?
Oh, I can't tell you that. If Joey had swallowed anything with plastic, anything with 1,4-butanediol, the 1,4 would have turned into GHB, and that's all we would have seen on the toxicology report.
Doctor, you just said you can't tell us that. You would agree with me that the only product that was consistent with that toxicology screen was the princess beads.
The toxicology screen didn't report any other chemicals consistent with other household products. But if those products had 1,4 in them, and only 1,4, like anything made of plastic, that would turn into GHB, and that would also be consistent.
Well, doctor, I didn't ask you to speculate about other components of household products. I asked you about what you saw on that toxicology screen. And what you saw was that the only product consistent with Joey's tox screen was the princess beads.
No, from the toxicology screen, I found that the only chemical present in Joey's system was GHB.
Doctor, that matches the princess beads and only the princess beads. You would agree with that, wouldn't you?
No, what I would agree with is that the 1,4-butanediol in the princess beads turns into GHB, and that's consistent.
Doctor, I'm going to ask you one more time. You would agree that the only product consistent with that toxicology screen is the princess beads. That's the only product that matches the screen that you reviewed in this case, right?
So long as other household objects didn't contain 1,4-butanediol, sure.
All right, doctor, now let's talk about the next possibility that you examined in this case. And that was...
Just a beautiful like exit, you know? It's like she flags, okay, I'm gonna ask you this one more time, you know, and Cindy's got the affidavit in her hand, and you know, all of a sudden I've got the affidavit in my hand, because I'm like, yeah, I don't even know if this is right or not. And it's such an art form to kind of like not give ground, but get out of impeachment territory at the same time in one answer, or, you know, leave it such that an impeachment seems kind of futile or silly without actually giving ground. And it's just a hard thing for witnesses to do. It's one of the hardest things to master, at least based on what I see when I watch kids compete. And that was just great.
Was that a direct impeachment? Was she like, was it going to be a clean one if you denied it?
No, I don't think. Oh, sorry, Amanda.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel like you or Iain probably have a better memory of this report even than I do now, but I don't think it was going to be clean. And the reason is because the case was deliberately leaving a hole for, you know, other sources of the GHB. And so, you know, as long as you're in this murky territory of like lots of stuff contains 1,4 and 1,4 is going to turn into GHB, then you don't really have a strict impeachment on the princess beads are the only thing that could have been the source of GHB in the tox screen.
Yeah, the case was explicit about how it could have come from any household objects, from nail polish, from something else. University of Georgia, I don't know if they were sanctioned, but they were dragged on perjuries, the mock trial forum at the time, because they took it one step further. And they had their Brett Miller, the babysitter, have a bunch of stuff that could have GHB. They just sort of testified they had that stuff. And as their Brett Miller was leaving the stand, they knock over their bag and all of those things fall out of the bag. If they're that clumsy and probably poisoned this kid. So to answer the question, I don't think this was impeachable.
But the other thing I'll say is, like, in the middle of that back and forth there, there's kind of a good lesson I just noticed watching. It's like, if you got a witness who's good and they're handling it, I think that's the mark of like a mature competitor, like a competitor that's been doing this for a minute. Just let them handle it. Like I'm itching to get up so bad. And Alex, who, you know, my co-counsel, had a little bit more experience than me at the time, he just kept going like, because my first two objections were not good. And Amanda was handling it fine. And it's like you're itching as a competitor to get up and say something oftentimes when you're inexperienced. You got a good witness, just let them take care of it.
A respiratory condition, right?
That's right.
You told us that Joey could have had a bronchospasm, right?
Oh, he did have a bronchospasm. We found evidence of that in the autopsy.
So, doctor, it's your testimony that on August 8th, Joey Davis died from a respiratory condition?
I think it's quite likely.
Well, you're aware that on August 8th, Joey had 148 milligrams per liter of GHB in his blood. You are aware of that, doctor?
Oh, yes.
That's not a normal amount for a human to have in their system, is it?
Oh, certainly not.
Doctor, 148 milligrams per liter is almost 15 times the natural amount of GHB.
I would agree with that, yes.
You would agree that respiratory conditions, well, they can't account for those levels of GHB in Joey's blood.
Oh, no, they certainly account for the fatal respiratory arrest.
Doctor, is that a yes to my question? Respiratory conditions, they can't account for that GHB, can they?
That's right.
Now I want to talk about this chart that you showed us on direct examination.
Okay.
And you told us that there are two different trajectories for a GHB poisoning case, right?
Two different typical progressions of symptoms that we see. Right.
Just that Joey doesn't fall into either of those progressions, right, doctor?
That's what I said.
So what you're telling us is that Joey didn't die of GHB poisoning.
I cannot be certain of that.
Pause on this chart for a second. This is the most absurd chart that I may still yet today have ever seen around. And it's ridiculous. We had people object to it at captains occasionally and in round occasionally, but somehow weaseled out of all of that. And if we had better video quality, you would see that there is really nothing on these axes. The y-axis is severity and the x-axis is time. And I'm literally up there on direct just like, yeah, the symptoms got worse and then they got a little better and then they got like really bad and then they kind of stopped for a bit and then they got really bad. And just like drawing these fake lines. There's no universe in which this comes into a mock trial round nowadays, I think.
Is that, oh, you drew those lines on there?
Yeah, so the line that kind of like rises up and stops, that's GHB deadly poison line. And then the line that looks like a parabola, that's just like a mild case of GHB poisoning. It's a little bad. And then you recover. And then the weird line, which makes no sense, is Joey Davis's symptoms over time. So they were kind of bad, then they got better, then they were almost really bad, and then they stayed that way for a while, and then they got catastrophically bad when he died.
Doctor, you're telling us that Joey, he doesn't fit with either of those two projections?
Well, it's clear that his progression of symptoms is inconsistent with what we see in a typical clinical case.
Well, I don't want to talk about progressions or about statistics, doctor. Let's talk about what actually happened on August 8th.
Okay.
And you weren't Joey's treating physician, were you?
No.
And that means you weren't actually there when Joey was admitted to the hospital.
No, I wasn't.
Doctor, you are aware of Joey's symptoms that he exhibited on August 8th?
Yes.
You're aware that when Joey was admitted to the hospital, well, he was dizzy. He was confused, right?
Right.
Doctor, dizziness, confusion, those are symptoms of GHB poisoning.
Oh, they can be, yes.
On August 8th, Joey seized for 45 seconds.
He did.
Seizures, that's a symptom of GHB poisoning.
GHB and oxygen deficiency, yes.
Doctor, on August 8th, he vomited, right?
He did.
Vomiting, that's a symptom of GHB poisoning.
Right along with oxygen deficiency, right.
Is that a yes to my question? It is a symptom of GHB poisoning?
It is.
Doctor, on August 8th, Joey's heart rate, it began to slow.
Right before he died, correct.
That's a symptom of GHB poisoning.
Once the GHB levels in a person's body reach a fatal concentration, yes.
On August 8th, Joey fell into respiratory arrest.
Yes, he did.
That is a symptom of GHB poisoning.
only if someone has 300 milligrams of GHB per liter of blood. That's the only concentration that can affect a person's respiratory system.
Doctor, I didn't ask you about concentrations. I asked you about symptoms. Respiratory arrest, that's a symptom of GHB poisoning, isn't it?
At a fatal GHB level? Sure.
Dr. August 8th, that was the day that Joey died.
Yes.
It was the day that he exhibited all of those symptoms that we just talked about.
Those were some of his symptoms, yes.
It was also the day that he vomited 25 princess beads.
Correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Anything
It's a
else?
nice ending to that cross, I think, tying it back.
for
He's got
sure.
all these symptoms, and the only thing that, the other thing he vomited were all these beads.
Yeah, agreed. I like the ending. I love the I love musical repetition in a cross, that kind of coming back to, and that's a sign of this, and that's a sign of those those musical kind of repeats and parallel structures are fun.
I think that if that cross just did the last pocket and then one follow-up pocket where they asked about the peak concentration being higher, and Gardner doesn't know how high it was, maybe it was at 300, who knows, then that would have been an effective 2-pocket cross. But I think that all the stuff that was off affidavit or is really questions that are about procedural things or about your framing or structure, those are the ones that I think you're just really able to shine as being the in-control expert.
So how did you guys feel at this point in the round?
I felt nervous AF. Like, you heard me say oxygen, like not oxygen, and I was tripping over a bunch of words. I was super nervous, and I'm sure I blacked out that entire experience.
Iain and Brandon, did you guys feel like at this point, okay, we are handily in control of this round?
No, I wouldn't say handily in control. Because I think in that situation, I mean, you've been in Top Gun finals yourself, big final round. You're kind of in your head, and you're over scrutinizing everything that you think may not have been perfectly polished or whatever. But I definitely thought that we were in it for sure, because at that point we had 2 crosses that were done. So I definitely felt better than I did at halftime, where I just thought, I hope we don't lose too bad. What I was thinking at that time.
I was drowning in the folds of my suit, and I didn't condition my hair that day. I had no idea what was going on.
So you guys told me before we started recording that the thing you really thought we should watch was Brandon's closing. So we're going on 2 hours now, so I'm not going to force you, but think of all the people at home who've been waiting for this moment for a decade. They've been waiting for this episode. It's here. They want 15 more minutes of your time. Can we give it to them?
I think it's a terrific closing. I would love to watch it again.
We're doing it.
Please the court, yes. Plaintiff's counsel, members of the jury. To understand the present, you must look back to the past. See, the story of today's case begins well before the princess beads were even released. The story of today's case begins on October 5th of 2008.
Brandon, did you want to
Joey
stop?
David.
Can I stop this? So I only bring this up because you literally only heard that line twice. At the beginning of Alex's opening and at the beginning of my closing. To understand the present, you must look back to the past. Gonzalo gave us that. It means nothing. Gonzalo gave us that the night before because I didn't even know what a theme was. We were just going all season with no theme on this side. And Gonzalo's like, you guys don't have a theme. And I was like, oh, we don't? He's like,
on Tragedy and Blame for 3.5 minutes on opening and for a couple minutes on close, and that had been it.
So we just shoehorned it in. We're just like, well, I'll say it at the beginning. And I'm just like, well, I'll say that in the beginning. I'm like, I can't guarantee it'll ever come back. So that was that one.
Is in the emergency room because he's been having trouble breathing. He gets this tightness in his chest. He wheezes, he coughs, he gasps for air. Oxygen's not getting to his blood. Oxygen's not getting to his tissues. Oxygen's not getting to his brain. He feels lightheaded. And Joey's been having these attacks for 1 full year. This is the first time he's ever seen a doctor for them. Now, Joey, he's only 2 years old. Joey doesn't understand what's going on. But we know that Joey needs to see a respiratory specialist as soon as possible. We know that Joey is sent home untreated. Never goes back to that ER. Never goes to a free clinic. Never sees another doctor of any kind.
It's so smooth, Brandon.
And now
That's
it's
something
August
that you don't see nowadays in online mock trial. Like, everyone makes such a big use of exhibits, fills the screen, shows it, that they never use that exhibit super clearly, unless it's maybe a picture of the decedent, in the opening narration. And the way that you can just casually in physical mock trial pick up the exhibit, wave it around, put it down without breaking the opening narration is a great way to pick up those points on closing without losing the flow at all.
Yeah, just keeping people engaged, you know. I've always been, you know, give them something to look at, give them something to pay attention to. Just because attention spans are so short, just if you're waving something around, you're doing something with your body or whatever, it's something that might just grab them again if you've lost them. And I think that kind of comes from, Gonzalo's style. One thing I like about this that I'm kind of noticing now is the present tense use. I love the use of present tense. I don't know. I see it a ton now. I just always think it's more effective. It's a good way to kind of just make people feel like they're in it.
I was just going to comment on that. I don't think it had been a huge thing at the time. And I remember, I think we often told stories in the past tense in opening, or if we were going to tell a story in closing, it was going to be kind of in past tense. And this is the first time I remember hearing a present tense story. And the other thing that I think is really key about this closing is we're the defense. We're, ostensibly a big bad corporation. And Brandon is telling a present tense story from the viewpoint of the victim and turning that into a positive for a case. And that is very, very hard to do. And it's hard to do, especially because the only facts you're going on are facts from like an autopsy report or an ER visit. But telling that story from that child's perspective really gives the jury an opportunity to see how many times that parent could have taken care in a way that, the cross of Andy Davis just laid a little bit of the breadcrumbs for. You really bring it home with the present tense telling of that story. And that's just so great.
Of 2009, and Joey Davis is in the Davis family living room. He's doing what 2-year-olds do. He's running around. He's playing. And all of it.
Had you done that move every single time, or was that like you were just feeling it in the moment?
No, I had done that every time. Prior to nationals, this closing was very weird. It was one of the things that our coaches allowed us to keep. I think there was at one point where I was doing this respiratory thing and I would pop a balloon in my closing, which makes about as much sense as the parabola. This is respiratory attack. It made like no sense whatsoever, but it was just like fun. I remember one round I popped it and it flew out of my hand and it landed right in front of the woman at counsel table who was playing the mother of the kid. It's like the worst. I go over there and like awkwardly pick it up and I'm just like, this is respiratory attacks, maybe? I don't know. I'm just trying to get it away from her. So a lot of things. Once we found out we were going to Iowa, Gonzalo was like, I hear you're doing this and this and this. Yeah, that and that. Those are out. You can keep running though.
Joey Davis is in the Davis family living room. He's doing what 2-year-olds do. He's running around. He's playing. And all of a sudden, that familiar feeling, that tightness in the chest, the wheezing, the coughing, the gasping. Now, we know from Dr. Gardner that Joey's having a bronchospasm. We know from Dr. Gardner that bronchospasms cause nausea, they cause vomiting, they cause seizures, they cause coma. They can cause a person to pass away from respiratory arrest. Joey is finally taken to see another doctor, where he vomits, where he seizes, where he falls into a coma, where he passes away. And what does all this mean? Why are we here? Well, when you separate the tragedy from the facts, it means that plaintiff's counsel, they just haven't met their burden of proving direct cause. See, plaintiff's counsel had a burden that stayed at this table and never.
That's really smooth
over to this
because
table.
you go from the narrative. Typically after the narrative goes towards the burden section, but you do something here that I don't think I've ever seen in another AMTA closing, which is you give the thesis of the core element you're attacking in the legal language before you do the burden itself. And I think that other defenses who rely on attacking one element could benefit from being clear about that thesis, both before, during, and after the burden section.
I also think, I'm sure this table to this table thing, this was not the first time you had seen, you didn't come up with this, I'm sure. You'd probably seen someone do it. Had you seen someone do that kind of this table rhetoric before?
Yeah, I'm sure I had. I couldn't tell you who. Maybe it was someone from our A team at the time. It's interesting because it's actually like technically we got an affirmative defense going here. So I mean, I guess if you think of it as a very kind of segmented closing, it's still true, but with the affirmative defense there, it actually kind of like muddies whether it's appropriate to really say that. But I think because the sections were so distinct and separate, just in the way I organized it, it worked.
I only raise that because there are a generation of competitors who I'm sure will credit you with inventing that. Like they will say that they saw you do it in this round and you invented this.
Thanks for making me publicly claim it then.
That's right.
This counsel had to prove to you that Happy Land breached their duty to consumers by producing an unreasonably dangerous product. They had to prove to you that if there was a breach, that it was the direct cause of Joey Davis's passing, meaning but for the princess beads, the tragedy of August 8th of 2009 wouldn't have occurred. They also had to prove that if there was a breach, and if it was the direct cause, that it was also the proximate cause of Joey Davis's passing, meaning that it would be reasonably foreseeable to a reasonable company that the events of August 8th of 2009 would occur. So we're going to talk a little bit more about direct cause, and then we're going to talk about whether there ever was a breach of that duty. And then we're going to talk about something called comparative fault. Now, Mr. Diamond came up here.
I like this a lot. Right now, the meta in mock, it could be like, these are the three big facts. These are the three big questions. And I like that structure. I think it's good. I love the, she planned, she poisoned, she profited, or whatever it is. It's easy to follow. But I think there's something to be said for, these are the three legal elements that we're going to focus on. Let me roadmap them for you incredibly clearly. I like that too.
Joey's autopsy report. And we heard from plaintiff's counsel's witness, Dr. Tushmont, who took that stand and told you that the princess beads were the cause of Joey Davis's death. But you'll be able to look at this autopsy report in deliberations. And when you look at this autopsy report, I want you to look at two things: the conclusion while the GHB could have triggered respiratory arrest, that determination cannot be made by autopsy alone. Then I want you to look at the front page of this autopsy report. Whose name is on this autopsy report? Who assisted in this autopsy that came to that inconclusive ultimate opinion? Well, it's not Quinn Brown. It's not Dr. Gardner. It's plaintiff's counsel's own witness, Dr. Chase Tuckmont. After the testimony of Dr. Gardner, there can be little doubt. Joey Davis did not die from GHB. And if Joey Davis did not die from GHB, then Joey Davis did not die from the princess beads. And if he did not die from the princess beads, he died because he couldn't breathe. Now let's talk about breach of duty. Was there a breach in this case? Well, we heard from Quinn Brown. And Quinn Brown told us that Happy Land takes their duty to make safe toys with utter seriousness. A toy company that makes unsafe.
One, just that line delivery. Yeah. But also, I just think it's hilarious that I'm like, they take safety with the utmost of seriousness. And I'm talking about Quinn Brown. Quinn Brown was the representative. Yeah, Quinn Brown gave us this line I'm giving about how serious they take it. I just always found that funny.
Sometimes we put our pet rocks and we hit them against each other, and then we coat them in GHB. But only
that doesn't
be online.
Bode well for consumers. That doesn't bode well for sales. A toy company making unsafe toys, it doesn't make dollars, and it just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense ethically. Doesn't even make sense in terms of good business. So what did Happy Land Toy Company do?
Yeah, that was another one that they had to kind of like let me keep, you know. I listened to a lot of rap at the time, you know, so, you know, prior to that, I had the little like rhyming line or whatever. And I tried and like sneak in little rap lyrics into pieces. And so, Master P won us this round, I think.
That's right.
You also used, the only outcome was income or something, but I don't think that was this case. I think that was the Allen case, right?
That was an opening from a different case, and that was Drake.
That's right. Drizzy.
Bees were safe. Well, in addition to the denatonium that was put on each and every bead, in addition to the product testing, well, there were these warning labels. Now, let's put it in the terminology of something that we do every day, driving our cars. Now, one thing that helps to make driving reasonably safe are stop signs. They tell you to stop. They tell you to slow down. They tell you to proceed with caution. But continuing with our analogy, if a person is driving and someone's in the passenger seat and they say, hey, isn't that a stop sign? Shouldn't we slow down? Shouldn't we stop? Shouldn't we proceed with caution? And the person driving says, signs are everywhere. Not even worth reading. It's just junk. Well, who's to blame?
Yeah, so
well,
that
brings us to the third element.
Yeah, so that actually had come from the witness that we didn't see. Megan Payne gave an amazing portrayal as the babysitter, but there's this whole thing of, yeah, I was concerned about that the kid might eat the beads, and I asked the parents, you know, should I read the warning labels? And it's like, you know, what did Joey's father say? You know, you don't need to read that. It's all the same thing. It's just junk. So I took that, kind of did this little analogy thing. It's an interesting thing because every time, because this is like a negligence case, I always felt like it would be super easy to flip the stop sign thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like the bad evidence that the company, all the bad facts for the company that went to notice, you know, could easily be flipped. And it's an interesting thing. I'd love to ask Pat if he ever remembers this, because I see him like leaning in over to Cindy. And I always wonder, like, you know, is he thinking about going for a flip and then decided a different approach?
Of our case. Defense counsel's affirmative defense is something called comparative fault. And I will be the first to acknowledge what happened to Joey Davis was a tragedy.
Can we stop?
There's nothing that
Corellis is so good that when I went and looked at him, to try and like steal some of that sympathy. Like his portrayal was so real. He was so intense. He made me flub the line, and he's so good.
You can see him like sit up and get very like, he's very like intense in that moment as you approach him.
Defense counsel's affirmative defense is something called comparative fault. And I will be the first to acknowledge.
Scoots the chair up when you say comparative fault. It's really.
And just fantastic witnessing. You know, fantastic witnessing. What I tell students is like, even if you know, they're 6:15, you're sequestered, blah, 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 blah. It's like, we can still see you. So I kind of encourage students to kind of, and obviously he was a party rep. So even in the, you know, our imagined circumstances, he'd be in the room. But even when you're imagined like sequestered, I just tell students, keep the character up, you know, and pay attention to the round and react the way that person would, you know. I just think he did a great job at that.
Something called comparative fault. And I will be the first to acknowledge what happened to Joey Davis was a tragedy. And I know that there's nothing that I, Mr. Diamond, or anyone else in this room can say that will even begin to heal the wound that family must have suffered. And that's what makes the task before you today such a difficult one, because you have to separate the tragedy from the facts, and the judge will instruct you that if you find that the caregivers in the Davis household were even 50% responsible for the events that occurred on August 8th of 2009, if they didn't quite meet Happy Land Toy Company halfway, then you must find Happy Land not liable. I want you to think about the statements that you heard today. You were supposed to watch Joey. You were supposed to watch my son. If you had been paying attention, this never would have happened. I'm so sorry, Andy. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I want you to imagine that this area here that we call the well, that it's the Davis family living room. And Joey's reaching for the beads. He's touching them. He's putting them in his mouth. He's swallowing beads. Now, it'd be unreasonable to expect parents to be with their children 24/7. But it's not unreasonable to ask parents to move a box from here to somewhere out of the child's reach. From there to here. Find Happy Land not liable.
I thought it was just so, I mean, what you hear real trial lawyers say is if you want to get close to the jury box, you've got to earn that. I think at this point in the trial, you probably had. But I still think it's like you talked about how you watching this back, you were so close to the jury box.
To here. Find Happy.
And at this point in the close, like you are literally as close to these jurors as you can possibly be. Did anyone comment after the round that you were too close? I guess the one judge did, but did the other four?
He did. And you know, the reason I was even closer at that point, because a part of the gimmick was to have the warnings facing them and readable from where they're sitting. That was the thought process. So I got even closer than I had before. But yeah, the one judge who dropped us really took issue with how close I was to the jury throughout.
I remember watching this and thinking for the first time, like it's at that time, that was something that, you know, I'd been taught as a high school competitor and as a first year college competitor, you know, you don't want to get too close to the jury. But I remember watching this and thinking, this is the rare situation where it's appropriate. It's effective. And I just thought it was such a cool way to end the closing that close to the jury. And you're really connecting with them in that moment. Okay. At this point in the trial, did you guys feel like you had it? Like when they're deliberating and they're giving their comments and you're waiting for the result, were you confident? Did you feel like it was going to go your way? Did you feel like you lost? How did you feel?
I think I still felt like it could go either way. I mean, it was a close round. I felt good, definitely, from Brandon's closing. And, you know, Pat is a great closer too. I think I'm personally biased in favor of Brandon, but, you know, mock trial is so subjective. You never know what the judges are going to do.
And we were doing so many weird things and kind of taking so many risks that it was kind of like, who knows? But what I will say is even when I got up to close, like I was so pleased like with our witness performances. And I just felt like, I was like, if we take this, like, it's probably going to be on the witnesses, you know? And so that gave me a little bit more confidence that we were in it. But it was just such a style contrast, you know, everything they did was so clean. And then when you have style contrast, it's really like judge preference and you don't know who you have. But I definitely felt like we were in it.
I had the feeling that if it was a 5-0, we were swept. But if it was any division of the ballot, 4-1 or 3-2, then we were in it. But I didn't see the scenario in which we swept 5-0.
You guys have had some really big wins, all of you, following this. I mean, this was just the beginning for all three of you. Is this the biggest win of your mock trial careers for the three of you? Well, Amanda, I'll start with you. This one or Tyler Nationals as a law school competitor, which one was bigger for you?
You know, that's hard because this is such a big team effort. This felt like a really like a coming home moment, like a family moment, and that changes the way this victory feels. You know, Tyler Nationals is like, it's just you and one or two other people, and that was a very intense period in law school, so it felt like a tremendous feat simply because like we were coming off of, you know, exams and other things. But I think this still resonates with me as like that coming home, I found the thing that I want to do with my career type of moment, because I had been very unsure about law versus other stuff. And so this is probably that source of inspiration for sure.
Brandon, you went on to win 2 All-Americans after this, and obviously had a really successful law school career as well. Is this number one for you still?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because for me, it's what made me believe that I could do it. Like I could be a lawyer, you know, not having any lawyers in my family, kind of like non-traditional background, this and that. I'm getting like my suit from Target, you know what I mean? So like for me, it just seemed so kind of like far off, and it seemed like there were so many kind of hurdles to it. But to join this program and be coached by practicing lawyers and have them kind of believe in me, and then have some success in the activity. It's what made me believe that I could do it. And it's probably why I'm here doing it now, for real.
Iain, which one went more to you, 11 or 14?
It's tough. I think that this win solidified a personal philosophy for me, which is on paper, alongside the others, I was a national champion in mock trial, but I hadn't felt like that meant that I understood the activity, because I didn't. I had been in a couple rounds up to that point. I had one character that worked so far, but I didn't know what it was to object. I didn't know what it was to open or to close or anything like that. So I think it solidified a personal philosophy that it's not enough to have the win. I needed to deeply understand what was going on. And so that's become I think, primary character trait for me. And I'm not sure if that trait existed as strongly before 2011. So 2014 was great and gratifying, and it was beautiful. It was in Orlando, and I was surrounded by great friends. It was phenomenal, and it come to my own. But this one changed the trajectory of my life and myself as a person more.
Last thing, some rapid fire, and then we will mercifully get out of here. Best mock trial round ever. What's your pick?
Like ever, like in the entire scope of all of
the high school, college, law school. What's the best round ever
that we've been in? Sorry,
that you've ever seen?
Oh, I don't know. Iain's championship round was pretty phenomenal. I might have to go with that.
Brandon?
Or wait, can I?
You got it.
Another amazing round of mock trial is Rahul Hari v. Ben Wallace, both years in a row at Top Gun. That was just, both of those rounds were incredible. Okay, I'm done now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. God, we're such nerds. We're talking about this like sports fans. Things that are like widely available. I guess I'll keep it to like AMTA. My favorite I think it's 2015 and 2016. It's very hard to pick, but it's that Harvard-Yale round, then that Yale UVA round. I just think that like both teams were so dynamic and creative, particularly that Yale team in the 2016. The creativity was just off the charts. And that's just something that I like gravitate to. So I love using those rounds as teaching rounds.
Iain?
I mean, come on. Everyone said great rounds. You can't just choose one. I think that the most instructive round that kind of like shaped mock trial, that like I'm happy we have it, is the 2002 or 3 Howard versus Iowa round, because Iowa plays it so exactly. This is the mock trial formula. Howard's coming at it from a totally different style. That's a great round to watch, like 1,000,000%. And of course, the Schuetts, I think, come out of that round or something like that. Like I know that at least Neil Schuett comes out of that round. The Wallace-Harry round, where Ben Wallace has to direct examine the I think 6 or 7-year-old.
That's 16. That's 16. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible to watch. I think those are the ones for me.
Also, Northridge University's round when they won nationals.
Oh yeah. Looked like a murder.
Yeah, that was legendary too.
I think that's 09.
Yeah, that was my freshman year, and I remember the after party of that. Like that was just, they were incredible, really good.
Okay, harder question. Who is the best competitor of all time?
Ben Wallace.
You know, I would say I'm just gonna keep it to AMTA. I would say Stern or Iain. Iain's done both in the championship rounds. That's kind of hard to match, you know.
I mean, both people here are good contenders for GOATs. You know, Amanda and Brandon are both phenomenal. Present company excluded, I think Zach Fields. And there's a couple reasons why. First, I think Zach Fields, his witness is underrated, but people don't know that he was an expert witness in downtown finals where he was cross-examined by Brandon. So earlier on, before he came into this winning everything all the time attorney, he was this top tier expert witness. And for people who don't know the Harvard story, I mean, it's a lot to get into right now, but what happened to them in 2014, a terrible tragedy. And for Zach to come back in 2015 with a team that was basically all novices at the national circuit level and to dominate everything in 2015. I'm not sure if they lost a single tournament that year.
They didn't.
Yeah, like
it was crazy.
I don't know how you can argue against it, especially because he went head to head with me and beat me. He went head to head with Daniel Stern, beat Daniel Stern. I think it's Zach Fields.
Yeah, I think those would be, all the people you said would be in the top 10 for sure, no matter who you ask. And those are really good answers. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this 2.5 hours later, but I think I always make a joke at the end. I don't know who's watching this all the way through, but I think this one people were actually going to watch all the way through. This lived up to the hype for sure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks for having us, Phil.
Our pleasure.